Hello, class. My name is Ryan Forrest, and I am responding for this week's discussion post. Colin Grant's video was interesting. I really enjoyed the way that he carried himself and the way that he spoke. His introduction I found especially interesting, just because he was saying things that weren't necessarily humorous, but the audience really found them funny, and I couldn't tell at first whether they were supposed to be funny and it was just his dry sense of humor, or whether it was something that he was serious about and it wasn't anything to laugh about. So that kept me intrigued. That was a really great introductory point, if you ask me. Um, as far as our handouts, I've seen the Aristotle's rhetorical triangle before, and so I think it's really valuable in figuring out your audience and your purpose, and sharing a little bit about who you are as far as what you're trying to communicate to your audience, and then also the central part of the medium, um, what kind of storytelling you're going to be doing or what kind of paper you're going to be writing. Um, so getting back to but what I found more interesting was Freytag's pyramid, because I haven't had any experience with that before. I haven't read it. I haven't seen that before. Uh, I feel like the exposition I kind of mentioned before, the introduction to the video that we watched, was really what captured me to begin with. The way that he introduced it was alarming, to say the least. He was the whole purpose to begin with was to tell us how much he really despised his dad. And everybody, it's interesting. It was interesting as I was listening to it, because I thought, okay, if it's humorous, everybody kind of feels that way about their parents at some point. You know, some of us don't necessarily want to kill our parents, but we do feel a certain amount of angst towards our parents, especially when we get into those adolescent years. And so, um, it was a great way to start off. Then the rising action that he got into, he started talking about the problems that he had with his dad and the problems that he had with education and the difficulties that he encountered culturally because of where his family came from. That was another thing that I felt was very interesting. The idea that his culture was constantly being watched, and the whole purpose in his dad. Well, I don't know if it was intentionally said or if it was more hinted at, that the idea of his dad wanting to instill in him the idea that he is constantly being watched. I couldn't tell if it was more of a protective thing or more of a tyrannical thing from his dad to his family. And obviously, it didn't bode super well with his wife and with his kids, because his kids wanted to kill him and his wife kicked him out. And so you got that idea that he took it to the extreme, that his dad took that idea of maybe trying to be protective and wanting to have his family grow up differently than he did, or maybe even in making a change in the culture in a positive way, maybe instilling some ideas in him that, we have to put our best foot forward so that we aren't those ones in the headlines, like he had mentioned. Um, it, the cringeworthiness of hearing about people of color that had committed a crime, how that made headlines, and he didn't. Maybe his dad didn't necessarily want that for his kids. Um, the next thing was the climax. The climax of his story, I feel, was really when he went back to meet his dad after those 3 decades. I really like the way he said decades. uh, Decades, or he pronounced it in a different way. But anyway, the decades that he went through with not having any communication with his dad, I feel like that the climax was when he did meet his dad again, and in having that conversation with him and finding out that his dad felt like he had a special connection with him. But at the same time, the next day or soon after, when he read the headlines about the conversation what impact that was going to have on their relationship, his dad felt slighted. He felt like he was slandered. He felt like his reputation was being put into question. And so he decided he had to go on the offensive. He had to turn back around and, what was the title? Uh, Bad Guys Bites Back. I mean, he had felt like he had to retort against his own son, who was doing it, was going through this purpose in order to maybe free him from some of those challenges that he had, either internally or emotionally or culturally or whatever. He felt like his dad had those struggles. Part of what he was doing was in order to free him from those struggles. And so, great climax, really good turning point. Um, then we have the falling action when things continue to kind of unravel. He had that conversation with his dad, and he decided they would. He wasn't sure whether they were going to have to take another break or whether they were going to be able to continue in that. And he decided to go back and have another conversation with him, go for another walk. He learned more things about his dad, being open to that, um, that part of his dad. And what really hit home for me in his specific narrative was, no matter how ruthless he felt like his dad was, no matter how unfair or unforgiving or unkind or unwelcoming or harsh, cold, abusive he felt like his dad was, he continued to point out the things that he found value in, the things that he could see as positives in his dad. That was meaningful for me. And then finally, the denouncement, the untying of everything kind of melded. He did a good job. There weren't obvious transitions from climax to falling action to denouement, I guess is how you pronounce it. It wasn't extremely obvious what where they flowed really well. They went from one category to the next, but they were all there. Um, in the walking with his dad, and then finally in the tying together of everything. In the end, he felt like he had made a connection with his dad that he couldn't have as a child. He was able to recognize the things that were positive about his dad, and then he personally was able to move on, and he shared a little bit about his relationship with his kids throughout, and then finally at the ending too. Excuse me. Um, that was my take on it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Um, I look forward to meeting you and getting to know you. Thanks.